It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday morning on a crowded city bus. The bus was packed. It was 8:15 a.m. during rush hour, which meant everyone was cramped together, nobody was happy, and everyone was thinking about work or meetings or problems waiting at home. A woman got on the bus. She was in her early 60s. She had gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was wearing simple clothes, a button-up shirt and modest pants. And she was missing her left leg. In its place was a prosthetic leg that she wore with the kind of practiced ease that came from years of adjustment and adaptation. But even with the prosthetic, balance on a moving bus is difficult. Standing on a moving bus is extremely difficult. She looked around the crowded bus, hoping to find a seat. But every seat was taken. Every single one. The bus was full. So she stood there, holding onto the overhead rail with one hand, trying to keep her balance as the bus lurched forward. A man sitting in one of the front seats watched her. He was probably in his mid-70s, dressed in work clothes that suggested he was a tradesman of some kind. He'd been riding this bus for years. He knew what it was like to be tired, to be working hard, to deserve rest. The woman was struggling. Anyone could see that standing on a moving bus with one leg was difficult. Painful, probably. Exhausting, certainly. The man did something that changed everything. He stood up and offered her his seat. But it wasn't what he said next, it was how he said it, that made this moment unforgettable. If you believe that real kindness isn't about grand gestures, but about seeing people and honoring their dignity, this story will remind you why it matters. Like and subscribe so you never miss stories about ordinary people being extraordinary. The woman's journey. Her name was Sarah Martinez. She was 62 years old, and she'd spent most of her adult life working in a hospital as a nurse. For 42 years, she'd gone to work every day. She'd cared for patients. She'd helped people in their most vulnerable moments. She'd seen people at their best and their worst. Sarah had always been independent. She wasn't the kind of woman who asked for help. She wasn't the kind of person who wanted to be treated differently because of her circumstances. But life had other plans. At 58 years old, while getting off a bus just like this one, Sarah had an accident. A moment of carelessness, a moment of imbalance, and suddenly she was falling. She fell under the bus. Her left leg was crushed. The doctors had tried to save the leg. They really had. But the damage was too severe. The infection had set in. There was no choice but to amputate. Sarah had spent months in recovery. She'd spent weeks learning to walk with a prosthetic leg. She'd spent countless hours in physical therapy, fighting to regain the independence that she'd lost. And she'd succeeded. She could walk again. She could get dressed. She could cook. She could manage most of life's normal activities. But public transportation was still difficult. Walking on a moving bus was still challenging. Asking for seats was still humiliating. So Sarah had adapted. She tried to ride the bus at off-peak hours. She tried to sit near the door so she could get on and off quickly. She tried to make herself as small and unobtrusive as possible. Most of the time, people didn't even notice her. Or if they did, they looked away. They looked at her prosthetic leg and then looked away, uncomfortable with the reminder that injury, disability, and loss exist in the world. Sarah had gotten used to being invisible. The man who noticed. The man sitting in the seat in front of where Sarah was standing was named Robert Chen. He was 74 years old, and he'd worked in construction his entire adult life. He was retired now, but he still did small jobs for people who needed help, fixing things, building things, working with his hands. Robert had seen a lot in his 74 years. He'd seen people at their best. He'd seen people helping each other. He'd also seen people ignoring each other, passing by in their own worlds, too busy to notice when someone needed help. Robert had always believed in kindness. Not the showy kind of kindness that was meant for recognition, but the quiet kind. The kind that said, "I see you, and you matter." He'd experienced hardship himself. He'd worked physically his whole life, which meant his body had paid a price. His back hurt. His knees hurt. His hands had arthritis. Every morning was a battle against pain and stiffness. So when he saw Sarah struggling to stand on the moving bus, he knew immediately what he needed to do. He stood up. The moment. Sarah didn't expect anyone to move. She'd learned over the past 4 years not to expect things. She'd learned to be prepared to stand the whole ride if necessary. She'd learned not to ask, not to seek help, not to make a fuss. So she was genuinely surprised when the older man stood up. "Please," he said, gesturing to his seat. "Sit down." Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want to accept charity. She didn't want to be the woman who needed special treatment because of her disability. "It's okay," the man said, seeing her hesitation. "Please. I insist." Sarah slowly made her way to the seat. She sat down. She said a quiet thank you. The man nodded and moved a little ways down the bus, holding onto the overhead rail. He was standing now, just as Sarah had been. But then he did something that nobody was expecting. The internal battle. As Sarah sat down, she felt something strange. She felt ashamed. She felt grateful. She felt embarrassed. She felt relieved. All of these emotions at once. The shame came from accepting help. Sarah had always seen herself as strong. She'd spent 42 years helping other people. She'd been the one giving care, not receiving it. And now, at 62 years old, she was sitting down and accepting a seat from a stranger because she couldn't stand for a 15-minute bus ride. The embarrassment came from being noticed. Sarah had spent the last 4 years trying to be invisible. She tried to move through the world without drawing attention to her missing leg. She tried to be normal. She tried to pretend that losing a leg wasn't a big deal. But the man had noticed. He'd seen her struggling. He'd recognized that she needed help. And somehow, that made her feel both seen and exposed. Seen in a way that felt kind. Exposed in a way that felt vulnerable. The gratitude came from the kindness. Sarah understood that this man had given up his seat. He was now standing, which was probably uncomfortable for him. She could see that he had some physical limitations of his own. He'd sacrificed for her. And the relief came from finally being able to rest. Her prosthetic leg was uncomfortable. Balancing on a moving bus with it was exhausting. Sitting down meant she could breathe. She could stop fighting. She could rest. But beneath all of these emotions was something deeper. Something that Sarah had been pushing down for 4 years. A question. Was she still valuable even though she was disabled? The fear that haunted her. After the amputation, Sarah had spiraled into a kind of depression. Not the kind that comes from sadness about what happened, but the kind that comes from a fundamental shift in how you see yourself. Before the amputation, Sarah had been a nurse. She'd been a caregiver. She'd had purpose. She'd had value. She'd had a role in the world that people recognized and appreciated. After the amputation, Sarah wasn't sure who she was anymore. She wasn't sure if she was still valuable. She wasn't sure if people still saw her as Sarah, the strong, capable nurse, or if they just saw her as the woman with one leg. She'd gone back to work for a while, but eventually, the physical demands became too much. She'd taken early retirement. And when she'd retired, she'd lost her identity. She'd lost her purpose. She'd lost the thing that had made her feel like she mattered. Now, at 62 years old, Sarah was trying to figure out who she was. She was trying to figure out if she still had value. She was trying to figure out if she was still worth anything. And on that Tuesday morning, on that crowded bus, she was struggling with all of those questions. The words that changed everything. As Sarah sat down, she felt the tears coming. She tried to hold them back. She didn't want to cry in public. She didn't want to be the woman crying on the bus. But she was barely holding it together when the man did something unexpected. He bent down slightly so he could speak to her quietly. He wanted to speak to her in a way that only she could hear. He wanted this to be between them. "I want you to know something," he said gently. His voice was quiet, but it was steady. His eyes were kind. Sarah looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes. "You are not a burden," the man said. His words were simple, but they landed like truth bombs. "You're not a problem. You're not someone to feel sorry for. You're a person who deserves a seat on a bus just like everyone else here." Sarah's hands started shaking. "I can see that you're strong," he continued. I can see that you've been through something difficult. But that doesn't make you less. That makes you more. That makes you someone to admire." He paused, and his eyes held Sarah's for a moment. "So when I offered you this seat, it wasn't because I felt sorry for you," he said. "It was because I see a strong woman who deserves rest. It was because I see someone who's worth honoring. It was because I wanted you to know that you matter." The breaking point that led to healing. Sarah's tears started flowing then. Not silent tears. Not the kind of tears you can hide. But real, honest tears that came from someplace deep inside. The other passengers on the bus pretended not to notice. They looked away. They looked at their phones. They looked out the windows. They gave Sarah and Robert the privacy that grief sometimes needs. Sarah sat there, with tears streaming down her face, and something shifted inside her. For 4 years, she'd been carrying shame. She'd been carrying the burden of feeling like she was less because she'd lost a leg. She'd been carrying the weight of feeling like she was a burden to everyone around her. But this man, this stranger, had seen through all of that. He'd seen the person. Not the disability. The person. And by seeing her, by honoring her, by telling her that she mattered, he'd somehow given her permission to see herself differently. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. She could barely get the words out. "Thank you so much." "You're welcome," Robert said simply. He straightened up, still holding the overhead rail, still standing on the moving bus. Sarah looked at him, and something made her ask a question that she'd been afraid to ask for 4 years. "Do you think I'm still normal?" she asked quietly. "Do you think I'm still a whole person even though I'm missing a leg?" Robert didn't answer immediately. He thought about the question seriously. He understood what Sarah was really asking. She wasn't asking about her physical body. She was asking if she still had worth. If she still had value. If she still mattered. "I think," Robert said slowly, "that you're more whole than most people I know. Because you've been through something that would break a lot of people. And you're still here. You're still getting up. You're still living your life. That's not missing a whole person. That's a whole person who's been through something hard and kept going anyway." He paused. "That takes more strength than most people have in them," he said. The realization. As Sarah sat there, still crying, something changed. The tears didn't stop, but their nature changed. They stopped being tears of shame and started being tears of release. Tears of healing. Tears of finally acknowledging pain that she'd been holding inside for too long. For 4 years, Sarah had been grieving her leg. She'd been grieving the life she'd had before. She'd been grieving the person she thought she was supposed to be. But in this moment, on this crowded bus, with a stranger who'd shown her kindness, she understood something new. She understood that grief doesn't erase you. Loss doesn't make you less. Difficulty doesn't diminish your value. She was still Sarah. She was still a person who had cared for people for 42 years. She was still someone who had kindness and strength and love to give. The missing leg didn't change any of that. The missing leg was just a physical thing. Her character, her essence, her worth, that was still all there. And maybe, just maybe, she was even stronger because of what she'd been through. What happened next? The bus continued on its route. It made stops. People got off. People got on. The ordinary rhythm of city life continued. But something extraordinary had happened in the middle of that ordinariness. Robert got off the bus at his stop. Before he left, he said something to Sarah. "Have a good day," he said. "And remember, you matter." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. After Robert got off, Sarah sat for a moment. She looked around the bus at the other people. She looked at them, really looked at them, as people with their own struggles, their own challenges, their own fears. She realized that she wasn't alone in her pain. She wasn't the only person on this bus who was dealing with something difficult. Everybody was carrying something. Everybody had a story. Everybody was struggling with something. And in recognizing that, she felt less isolated. She felt more connected to the human experience. She felt more like herself. What Sarah learned. When Sarah got off the bus at her stop, she made a decision. She wasn't going to be ashamed anymore. She wasn't going to try to hide her prosthetic leg. She wasn't going to pretend that she'd been through something easy. She was going to be honest about her journey. And in being honest, she was going to give other people permission to be honest too. She started volunteering at a disability support center. She started talking to people who'd recently had amputations. She started sharing her story, not to inspire people with a tragedy to triumph narrative, but to tell the truth about what recovery looked like, about what loss felt like, about how you survive something that breaks you. And something beautiful started happening. People started responding. People started opening up about their own struggles. People started understanding that disability wasn't a tragedy. It was just a different way of being in the world. Sarah became a different kind of caregiver. Not a nurse in a hospital, but a caregiver in a community center. Not helping people recover from acute illness, but helping people recover from the loss of who they thought they were supposed to be. The universal truth. What Sarah learned from Robert on that bus is something that our society desperately needs to understand. Your value as a human being is not dependent on your physical abilities. Your worth is not measured by what you can do or how you look. Your value comes from who you are. ****. We live in a culture that's obsessed with productivity, with achievement, with what you can accomplish. And we've forgotten something fundamental, that every person, regardless of their abilities or disabilities, has inherent value simply by existing. Sarah had internalized the message that she was less valuable because she'd lost a leg. She'd believed that her worth was tied to her ability to work as a nurse. She'd believed that being disabled meant being less. But Robert showed her something different. Robert showed her that her value didn't change because her physical abilities changed. Robert showed her that she was worth honoring, not because of anything she'd done or anything she could do, but simply because she was a human being who deserved dignity and respect. The impact that ripples forward. Sarah never saw Robert again. She never knew his last name. She never knew where he worked or what his story was. But she thought about him every single day for the rest of her life. She thought about him when she was struggling. She thought about him when she was doubting herself. She thought about him when she was tempted to believe the lie that she wasn't good enough anymore. And she would remember his words, "You matter." Those 3 words changed Sarah's life. Not because they were eloquent or poetic, but because they were true. And they were spoken by someone who had no obligation to speak them. Someone who had nothing to gain by saying them. Someone who said them simply because he saw a person who needed to hear them. Sarah started saying the same words to other people. To people in wheelchairs. To people with visible disabilities. To people who looked like they didn't think they mattered. And sometimes, those words changed their lives too. The real meaning of kindness. What happened on that bus that Tuesday morning wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It wasn't a wealthy person helping a poor person. It wasn't a person without disabilities helping a person with disabilities. What happened was one human being seeing another human being and choosing to honor their dignity. One human being recognizing the struggle in another human being and choosing to ease that struggle if possible. One human being understanding that everyone is fighting a battle and choosing to be gentle. That's what kindness really is. It's not about the size of the gesture. It's about the intention behind it. It's about seeing someone and saying, "You matter." Robert could have just given up his seat and said nothing. That would have been kind. But by speaking to Sarah, by naming what he saw in her, by telling her that she mattered, he did something even more important. He helped her see herself the way he saw her. And when you help someone see themselves the way a good person sees them, you change their entire life. The gift that keeps giving. Years later, Sarah would tell this story to people she met. She'd tell them about the old man on the bus who changed her life with a few words and a seat. And people would ask her, "Have you thanked him? Have you found him?" And Sarah would shake her head. She didn't know where to find him. She didn't know his name. She'd never exchanged contact information with him. But she didn't need to. Because the gift Robert gave her wasn't a debt to be repaid. It was something that was meant to be given forward. So Sarah gave it forward. She gave it to every person she met who was struggling with disability or loss or self-doubt. She gave it to people who'd forgotten that they mattered. She gave it to people who needed to hear from a stranger that they were worth honoring. And those people gave it forward too. They told other people. They helped other people. They created a ripple of kindness that started on a crowded bus and spread throughout a community. Fire the final word. What happened on that Tuesday morning on a crowded city bus is a story about kindness, but it's more than that. It's a story about seeing people. It's a story about recognizing that everyone is carrying something. It's a story about understanding that the most powerful thing you can do is tell someone that they matter. Sarah Martinez spent 4 years believing that she was less because she'd lost a leg. She believed that her value was tied to her productivity, her physical abilities, her usefulness. But one man, a stranger she'll probably never see again, showed her something different. He showed her that she was valuable simply because she was a person. He showed her that loss doesn't erase you. He showed her that strength isn't about what you can do. It's about who you are. And in that moment, on that crowded bus, Sarah's life changed. Not because someone fixed her. Not because someone cured her disability, but because someone saw her and honored her. If this story reminded you that every person deserves to be seen and honored, like and subscribe. Today, look at the people around you differently. Look at them with the eyes of someone who understands that everyone is carrying something. See the single mother tired from working 2 jobs. See the elderly person struggling to carry groceries. See the person with a disability trying to navigate a world that wasn't built for them. And if you can, do something kind. Not a grand gesture necessarily. Just something that says, I see you, and you matter. Because that's the most powerful thing you can do for another human being. Robert Chen may never know the impact he had on Sarah's life. He may never know that his simple words and gesture of kindness changed the trajectory of someone's entire future. But that's how kindness works. The best kindness is the kind that's given without expectation of recognition. The best kindness is the kind that's given simply because you see someone and you want to help ease their burden. On that Tuesday morning, on that crowded bus, Robert Chen gave Sarah Martinez the greatest gift one person can give another. He made her feel like she mattered. And that changed everything.